She'd learned the hard way that mercy was usually a lie. Clara Voss lay curled in the weeds, her dress torn, her throat raw, her wrists marked from rope. She'd run before, and they'd dragged her back before. And Dodge City had laughed like it was normal. Back when the Santa Fe rails brought money, trouble, and fast guns into towns like Dodge City, men said the law would clean it up. It never did, not all the way, because money always found a way. A shadow fell across the boards. Boots stopped close, slow, like the man wearing them had all day. Silas Crow stood on the other side of the fence, 47 and worn hard by weather and work. He carried scars from the war years in the plains, the kind that taught a man not to waste motion or mercy. He had a hunting knife on his belt and dried blood on his sleeve that could have been deer, or it could have been something worse. He didn't smile, he didn't speak, and he didn't hurry. That calm meant he'd handled rustlers and worse, and he didn't scare easy. Clara's voice came out small, and it came out broken. Do whatever you want. She meant it like surrender, because surrender was the only thing that sometimes kept a girl breathing. Her eyes finally lifted, and they met his, and she flinched like he'd already struck her. Silas didn't reach for her. He looked past her, out toward the open prairie, and his gaze tightened like a man reading a bad sign. Two figures were moving on the far track, one mounted, one riding hard behind. Even at a distance, the first hat brim sat too straight, and the posture screamed law, only it didn't feel like help. It felt like ownership. Silas's voice dropped, low enough to be mistaken for a threat. It'll be quick. Silas shifted one step, and he placed himself between her and the approaching riders, like a door being shut. He nudged her back with the edge of his arm, not gentle, not rough, just certain. He pressed one finger to his own lips, and the order in it felt practiced. The mounted man came closer, and the metal on his vest caught the sun. A deputy. He didn't call out a question, and he didn't ask if she was hurt, because he already knew what she was. He raised a crumpled paper, too clean to have ridden far, and his eyes never left Clara. The badge looked bought, and the rider behind him moved like a man who'd hunted people before. If that second man was Wade Pike, then quick could mean rescue, or it could mean the end. The deputy rode up close, and he stopped like the ground belonged to him. The second rider stayed a few yards back, watching like a man waiting for permission to do wrong. Silas kept his shoulders loose, and he kept his hands where anyone could see them. Clara stayed low behind the fence, and her whole body shook with the effort. Clara flinched, remembering how Mercy had lied before. But Silas's steady eyes made her stay put. He said Clara was stolen property, and he said Dodge City wanted her returned. This deputy reached forward, and his fingers hooked the top rail like he planned to climb. Clara felt her throat close, and she tasted the same old fear she knew too well. Silas leaned a hair to the side, and he spoke calm enough to sound mean. He told Clara to stay down, and he told her to breathe slow. The deputy didn't like being told anything, and then that was the first honest sign. He stepped closer, and his voice turned sharp like a nail. Silas let him talk, and he waited for the moment that made it lawful. That moment came fast, because the deputy grabbed for Clara's arm. Silas moved once, and it really was quick. Quick didn't mean cruel, it meant controlled. He didn't draw a gun, because guns made noise, and noise brought friends. He caught the deputy's wrist, and he turned it the way ranch hands turned a stubborn calf. The badge man grunted, and his knees hit dirt before his pride understood. The deputy yelled loud enough to draw a few stares, the kind of noise that made trouble multiply. Silas stripped the man of his gun and cartridges, and that bought them minutes, not hours. He cut the reins loose and sent the horse off, because a man on foot can't chase fast. Silas didn't wait around to feel proud, because pride got people killed out here. He motioned Clara toward the river grass, and he kept his body between her and trouble. As they moved, Clara rasped out a few words, and they came out simple. She said she'd been sold at 16. She said the house had taken 5 years from her. She said every time she ran, Wade Pike brought her back. Silas nodded once, and he said they wouldn't be going back to that house. But the second rider was already turning his horse, and he was heading hard toward town. If that man carried a message to Madam Pike, how long would it take before Dodge City sent more than 2 Silas kept them moving? Because the prairie didn't forgive slow feet. He guided Clara into the river grass, where the stems hid tracks and faces. Silas picked the line the way he'd learned hunting deer, stepping on hard ground and shallow water, so their tracks broke up fast. The other rider had already left, and that was the real problem. A man who rides to town fast usually rides back with friends. Clara tried to speak, and only a thin sound came out at first. She said the woman in town was named Lenora Pike, and everyone called her Madame. She said the house looked polite from the street and mean once the door shut. She said she'd run more than once, and each time Wade Pike found her, Silas didn't ask for the rest because he could hear enough in her breathing. He offered her water after they'd gone a mile, not before. He wasn't cruel, he was careful, and there's a difference older men understand. Clara drank like she didn't trust the next minute to arrive. When Clara asked where they were going, Silas answered plain. He said he had a friend in Dodge City, a man who still believed a badge meant something. He called him Tom Rourke, and he said the word friend like it weighed a pound. They cut toward the edge of town as the light started to soften. Silas told her to keep her head down and stay behind the horse line. Then the trouble found them again, right where the grass met the first shacks. He knew the edge of town was where runaways had to pass. Wade Pike stepped out by a stack of crates, smiling like he'd been invited. He was lean, quick, and dressed too clean for an honest job in July. He didn't shout. He didn't need to, because confidence does the work for men like that. He said Clara was Madam's, and he said it like he was naming a tool. Silas planted his boots, and he kept his voice low. He told Wade to turn around and go back the way he came. Wade laughed once, then reached past Silas, aiming for Clara's sleeve. Silas moved, and the street got quiet enough to hear Clara's breath. Wade hit the dirt, and the men watching from doorways didn't rush to help him. That was when Clara noticed the worst part. Nobody looked surprised, and down the street, a deputy's hat appeared again, headed straight for them. Was that Tom Rourke coming to save them or coming to sell them back? The deputy hat came closer, and the man under it didn't hurry. He walked like he owned the street, and that made Wade Pike straighten up. Clara saw the badge, and her stomach dropped, because badges had never meant safety to her. Sheriff Tom Rourke stepped into the light, broad-shouldered, sun-worn, and tired in the eyes. He took in Wade on the ground, the watching faces, and the girl half hidden by a horse. Then he did the thing that made Clara feel cold all the way through. Tom grabbed Silas's arm, and he snapped iron on his wrist. The cuffs clicked, and the town let out a small breath, like a song they already knew. Outside, the crowd grew rowdy, whispering about a bought badge, and men started picking sides fast. Wade smiled through a split lip, because he thought he'd just won. Clara shrank back, and her mind screamed that she'd trusted the wrong man again. He told the crowd to clear the street, and he told Wade to get up and follow. Clara tried to move, and one of the deputies glanced at her like she was a stray dog. Tom didn't look at her again, not in public, not even once. Inside the sheriff's office, the air was cooler, and the noise fell away. Tom shut the door, and his shoulders dropped just a little. He leaned close to Silas, and his voice went low enough to disappear. He told Silas to play along, because eyes were everywhere in this town. Tom unlocked the cuffs, quick, quiet, and practiced. He pointed Clara toward a back room, and he told her to sit where she couldn't be seen. Clara didn't want to sit. She wanted to run, but her legs finally obeyed Tom's tone. Tom set a tin cup of water near her, and he didn't touch her. He asked her name, and he asked it like it mattered. Tom listened to the short version. Sold, trapped, beaten, and hunted. His jaw tightened, and he looked older than he had a minute ago. He told Silas the hard truth. Madam Pike had money, and money had friends. He said if they handled this wrong, Clara would be dragged back with paper that looked legal. Tom didn't promise comfort. He promised a plan. He said they needed the one thing Madame couldn't talk her way out of, her ledger and her contract. He said Wade would lead them to it, if Wade thought he was collecting his prize. Then Tom looked at Silas, and he asked the question that made the room feel smaller. Was Silas willing to let the town think he'd betrayed Clara? Just long enough to trap Madam Pike for good, Silas didn't answer Tom with a speech. He just nodded once. Because men like him didn't waste courage on words, Tom stepped back out front, put the cuffs back on, and raised his voice for the street. He made it look clean, like the law was finally doing its job. Clara heard the act through the thin wall, and it hurt like a fresh bruise, but she stayed because for the first time, someone had asked her to choose. Wade Pike swaggered into the office like he owned the air. He kept glancing at the back door, because greedy men always watch their prize. Tom let Wade brag for an hour, slipping in questions about the debts, the back room, and who handled the papers. Wade talked too long, then mentioned the safe in Madame's back room, a habit he regretted later. That was enough to break Madame Lenora Pike, the same way her house had tried to break Clara. The lawyers tried to stall it for weeks, because that is what money pays for. But the railroad men wanted the town quiet, and sudden attention makes bribery harder to hide. Not this time. By sundown, the town had a new story to whisper. Not about a girl being dragged back, but about a bought badge being exposed. Word ran down Front Street faster than any horse. That night, stones hit Pike's shutters, and nobody hurried to stop it. Tom didn't smile, because doing right in Dodge City could cost a man his job. Pace didn't smile either, because doing right could cost a man his life. But Clara did something bigger than smiling. She stood up straight, even while her hands still trembled. Later, when the street quieted, Silas walked her outside into the warm evening. He didn't touch her until she reached for his sleeve first. That was the whole love story, right there. Permission instead of taking. No fireworks, no fancy promises, just a man who stayed and a woman who chose. And if you're wondering what this has to do with you, it's simple. Most folks don't get chased through river grass, but plenty of folks get cornered by fear. The lesson's not that the world is fair. The lesson is that one steady choice, made at the right moment, can change the next 10 years. So what would you do? If you saw someone being pulled back into a life they never chose, would you look away because it was easier? Or would you stand there like Silas did? This story was collected and rewritten from frontier-era accounts, and a few details were added to raise the educational value, the moral lesson, and the entertainment. All visual illustrations in this video are created with AI to help the emotion land harder for you. If this kind of story is not your cup of coffee, take care of yourself first. If you are still here, you already know why. You want to see who pays and who walks free. Subscribe for more like this. Hit like and leave a comment. Would you stand your ground like Silas or play along like Tom to take down the worst of it?